The chandelier light sparkled against the champagne flutes as waiters in crisp black ties wove between guests. Laughter mixed with soft classical music, creating that perfect atmosphere of wealth and privilege. I stood by the bar watching my husband James work the room, his designer suit fitting him perfectly as he moved from one executive to another with practiced ease. This was his element, the annual Pinnacle Investments Gala, where the city's financial elite gathered to congratulate themselves on another successful year. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I smoothed down my midnight blue gown, the one James had specifically chosen for me. Something that will finally make you look like you belong, he had said with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. 6 years of marriage had taught me to recognize when he was being helpful versus when he was being cruel. Tonight, like most nights lately, the line was blurring. My name is Emma Mitchell, and 7 years ago I fell in love with a man who saw me as a project. James Mitchell, rising star at Pinnacle Investments, with his Ivy League education and family connections that stretched back generations. I was teaching kindergarten when we met, something James initially found adorable before gently suggesting I find something more suitable once we were married. That was the first red flag I ignored. Emma, come here. James beckoned me over with a slight frown. Victoria wants to meet you. I plastered on my best smile and crossed the room to where James stood next to Victoria Barnes, the formidable CEO of Pinnacle Investments. She was exactly as James had described her, elegant, intimidating, and scrutinizing me like I was a financial portfolio with questionable returns. So this is the teacher, Victoria said, extending her hand. James tells me you've been married. For 6 years now? Yes. Though I'm not teaching anymore, I replied, accepting her handshake. I work with the Westlake Community Foundation now. Victoria's eyebrow arched. Non-profit? How fulfilling. Emma loves helping people, James interjected, his arm sliding around my waist, fingers pressing a little too firmly. Though sometimes I think she could have aimed higher. The foundation barely pays enough to cover her shopping habits. The women around us tittered with polite laughter. I kept my smile fixed, though it felt like it might crack my face. This was James's favorite routine, positioning himself as the generous husband who indulged his simple wife's charitable whims while financially supporting her. The truth was, the foundation paid me quite well, and my family had never been the financial burden James imagined. Speaking of family, Victoria turned to me. James mentioned your parents are coming to town next weekend. Will they be joining us for the partners' dinner on Saturday? I felt James stiffen beside me. Oh, Emma's parents aren't really comfortable in these kinds of settings, he answered for me. They're more casual people. What my husband means, I said, maintaining my composure, is that my parents have other commitments that weekend. My father has business meetings. James gave me a look that clearly said we would discuss this later. The conversation shifted to Pinnacle's recent acquisition of a struggling competitor, and I was forgotten. That was how these events always went, James shining in his element while I was expected to be decorative and quiet. Later that night, as our driver took us home to our luxury condo in the Heights, James loosened his tie and finally acknowledged the tension. You didn't need to mention your father's business meetings, he said, making air quotes with his fingers. We both know Miguel's idea of business is fixing cars in that garage of his. I turned from the window to face him. My father owns that garage, James. It's been successful for 20 years. Yes, I know. Reyes Auto Shop serving the good working people of Riverdale. He rolled his eyes. It's respectable work, Emma. I've never said it wasn't. But it's not. The kind of business that Victoria Barnes would understand. And what exactly wouldn't she understand? James sighed, reaching for my hand in what seemed like a peace offering. Look, I'm up for senior partner. Everything needs to be perfect right now. Victoria is old school. She believes in family, legacy, proper connections, having in-laws who... He paused, searching for words. Who aren't white and wealthy? I supplied. Don't put words in my mouth, he snapped. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that your family is. Different from the circles we move in. More. Down to earth. Low class is what you mean. My voice was quiet but firm. You've been dancing around saying it directly for years, but that's what you think. James ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Emma, be reasonable. Your parents are wonderful people, but they live in a completely different world from us, from the one I'm building for us. His voice softened. I'm doing all of this for our future, for the family we'll have someday. I turned back to the window, watching the glittering skyline of Westlake slide by. We'd had this conversation too many times. James believed he was elevating me, rescuing me from my humble beginnings. He couldn't see that my family had given me everything that mattered. Love, support, values, things his prestigious upbringing had somehow failed to provide. The partners' dinner is important, James continued when I didn't respond. It's at the Grand Ballroom at the Westlake Hotel. Everyone who matters will be there. Victoria practically promised me the promotion if everything goes well. Congratulations, I said, meaning it despite my hurt. James had worked hard, regardless of his family connections. You deserve the recognition. He looked pleased, taking my response as a sign I was back on his side. Thank you, sweetheart. And don't worry about your parents. We'll have them over. For dinner soon, just the four of us. Something casual where everyone can be comfortable. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. James thought he was being magnanimous, but he didn't realize how condescending he sounded. My parents had never been invited to our condo in the 3 years we'd lived there. Every family gathering happened at their home in Riverdale, with James, checking his watch every 30 minutes and making excuses to leave early. The next morning, I called my mother while James was at the gym. ¿Cómo estás, mija? My mother's voice instantly warmed me, even through the phone. I'm okay, Mama, just missing you. I curled up on our pristine white sofa, the one James had insisted on despite its impracticality. How's Dad? Busy as always. The shop is doing very well, and your brother has been bringing in new customers with his social media marketing. Daniel's ideas are really working. Pride rang in her voice. I smiled. My younger brother had graduated with a marketing degree last year and had been modernizing our father's business. That's great. Listen, are you and Dad really coming next weekend? James mentioned you might be. There was a pause. Your father has been trying to call James about it, but he never picks up. We wanted to take you both to dinner to celebrate some news. What news? It's better to share in person. Nothing bad, she quickly added. Something good for the family. Will James be free for dinner on Friday? Just us at that Italian place. You like downtown? I hesitated. I'll ask him, but you know how he is with last-minute plans. 6 days is hardly last minute, Emma, my mother said with a hint of the steel that had helped her raise 2 children while working full-time and supporting my father as he built his business. You're right. I'll make sure we're there, I promised. A small act of defiance against James's careful scheduling of when my family was and wasn't convenient. When James returned from the gym, glowing with endorphins and self-satisfaction, I mentioned the dinner. Friday? Impossible. I have drinks with the board members. He didn't even look up from his protein shake. This is important to my parents. James, they're celebrating something. What thing? Now he looked interested, his mind immediately going to possibilities. Did your father finally decide to sell the shop and retire? The hopefulness in his voice stung. I don't know. They want to tell us in person. James sighed dramatically. Can't we do Saturday lunch instead? The partners' dinner isn't until 7. They specifically asked for Friday dinner. I already told them yes. I met his eyes with a firmness that surprised us both. James studied me for a moment, then shrugged. Fine, I'll reschedule the drinks, but I need to be home by 9 to prepare for Saturday. This promotion is everything. Emma. I know. I did know. James had been working toward senior partner since before I met him. It was his singular focus, the thing that drove him and defined him. Sometimes I wondered if he'd married me precisely because I fit some criteria on his life plan spreadsheet. Attractive enough, educated enough, malleable enough. The week passed in a blur of preparation. James was more demanding than usual, critiquing my choices and micromanaging our lives with precision. By Friday, I was exhausted from walking on eggshells around him. We arrived at Salvatore's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown, precisely at 7. My parents were already seated, my father in a crisp button-down shirt, and my mother wearing the pearl earrings I'd given her for Christmas. They both stood to greet us, and the contrast between my father's warm bear hug and James's stiff handshake was painful to witness. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You look tired, mija, my father said, holding me at arm's length. Is he working you too hard at that foundation? I laughed. The foundation is wonderful, Dad. Just busy with our new youth program. She's doing important work, my mother added with a pointed look at James, who was already studying the wine list. Very admirable, he murmured without looking up. My father cleared his throat. James, I've been trying to reach you. Sorry about that, Miguel. Work has been absolutely crazy with this promotion coming up. James finally set down the menu and offered my father his boardroom smile. Emma mentioned you have some news to share? My parents exchanged glances, a silent communication born of 30 years of marriage. We do, my mother began. But first, let's order. I'm starving, and the seafood pasta here is to die for. James checked his watch discreetly, but I caught it. I shot him a warning look, and he had the grace to appear slightly abashed. Once our orders were placed and wine was poured, my father leaned forward. We wanted to share some family news with you both. You know I've been working hard all my life, building the business, making investments when I could. James nodded, politely, though I could read his thoughts. What investments could a mechanic possibly make that would be worth a special dinner? My father left Mexico with nothing, Dad continued. He taught me that land and buildings. These are the things that last. So every extra dollar I put into property, small ones at first, then bigger as time went on. My mother squeezed his hand, beaming with pride. I'd always known my parents were comfortable, but they lived modestly by choice. The scope of my father's investments was news even to me. Over the last 5 years, I've been working with a group of other business owners, mostly immigrants like me. We pooled resources to invest in commercial real estate downtown. James was beginning to look interested despite himself. Commercial real estate in downtown Westlake had exploded in value over the last decade. Our group just finalized the purchase of our biggest property yet, my father announced, his eyes twinkling. The Oakwood Tower. I gasped. James froze, his wine glass halfway to his lips. Oakwood Tower? He repeated, his voice oddly strained. The building on Madison and 5th? My father nodded, unable to contain his smile. 28 floors of prime office space, fully leased to top companies including Pinnacle Investments, James finished, his face unreadable. A charged silence fell over the table. My mother, never one to miss dramatic timing, took a sip of her wine before adding, Yes, I believe. Your office is on the 25th floor, isn't it, James? James set down his glass carefully. It is. The implications hung in the air. My husband, who had spent years subtly belittling my family's background, who had deemed them too casual to meet his colleagues, who had never once invited them to our home, now discovered that his father-in-law was effectively his company's landlord. "Congratulations," James finally managed, his voice strained with forced enthusiasm. "That's quite an achievement, Miguel." "Thank you," my father replied simply. "We're very excited about this venture. In fact, I'll be meeting with your CEO next week to introduce myself as one of the new owners. Victoria Barnes, correct?" I watched as James processed this information, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that looked almost like fear. "Victoria is very interested in the building's new ownership," my father continued casually. "Apparently, Pinnacle's lease is up for renewal soon." The waiter arrived with our appetizers, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. As we began to eat, I caught my mother's eye. She gave me the slightest wink, and for the first time in years, I felt the power dynamic between my husband and my family shift dramatically. James was uncharacteristically quiet for the remainder of dinner, asking thoughtful questions about my father's business ventures and actually listening to the answers. When my father spoke about his plans for the building, James offered insights about tenant preferences with none of his usual condescension. By the time dessert arrived, James had extended an invitation to my parents to join us at the partners' dinner the following night. "As my guests of honor," he added with newfound respect. "Oh, I don't know," my father said, sharing another look with my mother. "Those formal events aren't really our style, right, James?" James had the good grace to look embarrassed. "I've been wrong about a lot of things, Miguel. I'd be honored if you and Isabella would join us." As we said goodbye outside the restaurant, my father hugged me extra tight. "You okay, mija?" he whispered. I nodded against his shoulder. "Better than okay." In the car ride home, James was subdued, staring out the window at the city lights. Finally, he broke the silence. "Your father is a very impressive man." "He always has been," I replied. "You just never bothered to notice." James turned to me, genuine remorse in his eyes for perhaps the first time in our marriage. "I've been an ass, haven't I?" I didn't immediately contradict him, which was answer enough. "I made assumptions about your family based on, what? Their neighborhood? Your father's profession? God, Emma, I've been so blind." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You have." He reached for my hand, and I let him take it, though I wasn't ready to forgive quite yet. "I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I don't expect you to believe me right now, but I want to do better." I studied his face in the dim light of the passing street lamps. "This isn't about the building or my father's business success, James. It's about respect. My family deserved your respect regardless of what they owned or how much money they had." "I know," he said quietly. "I know that now." As our car pulled up to our building, I couldn't help but wonder if this revelation would truly change anything. James had just discovered that the family he had dismissed as low class was wealthy and influential enough to impact his career. Would it be enough to shift his worldview, or would he simply adjust his prejudice to exclude my family while maintaining it toward others? Only time would tell. But as I watched him thoughtfully looking up at the night sky, I allowed myself a small hope that perhaps this embarrassing revelation might be the beginning of real change for James. And for us. The morning of the partners. Dinner arrived with an unusual atmosphere in our condo. James was different, attentive, almost nervous as he asked if my parents needed a ride to the venue, if there was anything specific they might enjoy. It was jarring to witness this transformation, his sudden interest in people he'd spent years avoiding. "Your father might appreciate the Macallan 25, he mused while adjusting his cufflinks. "The Westlake has an impressive selection." I watched him from the vanity mirror as I fastened my earrings. "My father doesn't drink scotch. He prefers tequila, Clase Azul, and only on special occasions." James blinked, absorbing this information as if it were breaking news. Right, of course. He made a mental note, his brow furrowing slightly. What about your mother? Any dietary restrictions I should mention to the chef? You've had dinner with my parents at least 15 times, James, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. She's allergic to shellfish, always has been. He had the decency to look embarrassed. I knew that. I just want everything to be perfect tonight. I turned to face him fully. Because they're important now? Or because you're afraid my father will mention the building ownership to Victoria before you have a chance to control the narrative? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with accusation. James straightened his already immaculate tie. That's not fair, Emma. I'm trying here. You're trying because you have to, I countered, rising from the vanity stool. Not because you want to. That's not true, he insisted, though his eyes slid away from mine. Last night was illuminating. I realized I've been unfair to your family. I want to make amends. I smoothed down my emerald green gown, one I'd chosen myself, not one of James's approved options. Then start by treating them with genuine respect tonight, not the performance you put on for clients. The drive to the grand ballroom was quiet, tension simmering beneath polite silence. We arrived early as James insisted on overseeing the final preparations. The venue was stunning, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across marble floors, flower arrangements in strategic locations, waitstaff in formal attire gliding silently between gleaming tables. The Reyes family will be at our table, James instructed the event coordinator, a nervous young woman with a clipboard. Make sure there's Clace Azul available, and double-check that Mrs. Reyes's dinner has no shellfish whatsoever. The coordinator nodded, making notes. And where would you like them seated, Mr. Mitchell? We typically place family members. Next to Victoria, James interrupted. Mr. Reyes should be seated next to Victoria Barnes. I stared at him in surprise. This wasn't just accommodation, it was strategic positioning. James caught my gaze and had the grace to look slightly abashed. Your father and Victoria will have plenty to discuss, he explained. It makes sense. Before I could respond, the doors opened, and the first guests began to arrive. James immediately switched into host mode, greeting board members and their spouses with practiced charm. I took my assigned position at his side, playing the supportive wife role I'd perfected over the years. Tyler Wong, James's closest colleague and sometimes friend, approached with his wife May. Emma, gorgeous as always, Tyler said, kissing my cheek. James mentioned your parents are joining tonight? That's a first. Yes, they'll be here soon, I replied, noting how Tyler's eyebrows rose slightly. Wonderful, May said warmly. I've heard so much about them from you. It'll be nice to finally meet them. James rejoined us, champagne flutes in hand. The Reyes family has been difficult to pin down, he said with a light laugh. Miguel runs a successful business empire that keeps him quite busy. Tyler blinked in surprise at this characterization, so different from the simple mechanic narrative James had pushed for years. I took a sip of champagne to hide my expression. Business empire? Tyler repeated. Real estate investments, primarily, James explained casually, as if he hadn't learned this information just yesterday. Commercial properties downtown. Very impressive portfolio. I excused myself, needing a moment away from James's revisionist history. In the ladies' room, I leaned against the marble counter, taking deep breaths. The woman I saw reflected in the mirror looked confident, elegant, nothing like the insecure kindergarten teacher James had rescued 7 years ago. When had that transformation happened, and why hadn't I noticed until now? When I returned to the ballroom, my parents had arrived. My mother looked stunning in a deep burgundy dress that complemented her warm complexion, her silver-streaked hair swept into an elegant updo. My father stood tall in his tailored suit. Not new, I realized, but well-made and perfectly fitted. They looked completely at ease, greeting people with genuine warmth that made James's practiced charm seem hollow by comparison. "Emma?" My mother embraced me. "This place is beautiful, mija." "You both look amazing," I said, returning her hug before kissing my father's cheek. "Your mother always looks amazing," Dad replied with the same adoration he'd shown for 30 years. James approached, all smiles. "Miguel, Isabella, welcome. Let me introduce you to everyone." What followed was surreal. James guided my parents through the room with the proud air of someone showing off treasured family members, not the reluctant obligation I'd witnessed at every previous encounter. More jarring still was how effortlessly my parents charmed the room. My mother discussed art with a board member's wife who served on the museum committee. My father engaged in a detailed conversation about market trends with the firm's CFO. They belonged here, had always belonged here, despite James's insistence otherwise. Victoria Barnes arrived fashionably late, commanding attention in a tailored black suit that exuded power. James immediately steered my parents toward her. "Victoria, may I introduce my father-in-law, Miguel Reyes, and his lovely wife, Isabella?" Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrow rose slightly. "Miguel Reyes? From the Oakwood Tower Investment Group?" My father smiled, extending his hand. "The very same. A pleasure to meet you properly, Ms. Barnes. I believe we have a meeting scheduled next week." "Indeed we do," Victoria replied, her calculating gaze reassessing everything she thought she knew. I wasn't aware of the connection to James. "My son-in-law can be modest about family ties," my father said with a pointed look at James that only we would understand. Victoria laughed, a genuine sound rarely heard in these settings. How refreshing. James has many qualities, but modesty isn't usually among them. James maintained his smile, though I noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. "Family is everything, isn't it?" he said smoothly. "Absolutely," Victoria agreed, taking my mother's arm. "Isabella, you must tell me how you raised such a poised daughter. Emma always stands out at these functions, authentic in a sea of pretense." My mother beamed with pride, and I felt a rush of gratitude toward Victoria, who had never before acknowledged me so directly. The group moved toward our table, Victoria keeping my parents close as she introduced them to key board members. James leaned toward me, his voice low. "They're doing well." "They've always done well," I replied quietly. "You just never gave them the chance to show it." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing as we took our seats for dinner. The meal progressed smoothly, course after exquisite course served with practiced efficiency. My father captivated the table with stories of his journey from mechanic to business owner to real estate investor. My mother charmed everyone with her warmth and sharp observations. I watched James watching them, something shifting behind his eyes with each passing moment. When Victoria tapped her glass for attention, the room quieted. This was the moment, the announcement of the new senior partner that James had worked toward for years. Pinnacle Investments has always been about recognizing excellence, Victoria began, standing regally at the head of the table. Tonight, we celebrate not just our financial success, but the people who make that success possible. James straightened imperceptibly, his expression carefully neutral, despite the anticipation I knew he felt. Leadership comes in many forms, Victoria continued. Sometimes it's about making the bold moves, taking the risks that others shy away from. Sometimes it's about having the wisdom to recognize opportunities that others miss. She paused, surveying the room. Our new senior partner has demonstrated both these qualities consistently. Their commitment to this firm, their innovative approach to client relationships, and their ability to build lasting partnerships have set them apart. James's hand found mine under the table, squeezing slightly. This was his moment. All the late nights, the networking events, the political maneuvering within the firm. It was about to pay off. I'm delighted to announce that our new senior partner is... Victoria paused for effect. Tyler Wong. The room erupted in applause. James's hand went slack in mine. Tyler stood, clearly surprised but delighted, accepting Victoria's handshake and the congratulations of those around him. I turned to James, whose face had hardened into an unreadable mask. "I'm sorry," I whispered, genuinely sympathetic despite everything. I knew how much this meant to him. He didn't respond, mechanically joining the applause while something cold and calculating settled in his eyes. When Tyler approached our table, James stood and embraced him with convincing enthusiasm. "Congratulations, Tyler. Well deserved," he said, his voice betraying nothing of his disappointment. "Thanks, man. I was sure it would be you," Tyler replied, his sincerity making it worse somehow. "Clearly Victoria made the right choice," James said smoothly. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of forced pleasantries and champagne. James maintained his composure with the skill of someone who had spent a lifetime concealing his true feelings. Only I could see the devastation beneath the performance. My parents, sensitive to the undercurrents, made their graceful exit shortly after dessert was served. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "Call me tomorrow, mija. We need to talk." I nodded, watching as James shook my father's hand with perfect politeness. "Thank you both for coming. It meant a great deal to have you here." Once they were gone, James circulated the room one final time, congratulating Tyler repeatedly, laughing at Victoria's jokes, playing the good soldier. But when he thought no one was watching, his eyes followed Victoria with something close to hatred. We left just before midnight, the silence in the car thick with unspoken tensions. James stared out the window, his profile sharp in the passing streetlights. "It should have been me," he finally said as we neared our condo. "I know," I replied softly. "I'm sorry, James." He turned to me, his expression bitter. "Do you know what she told me when I asked her privately? That I lack genuine connection with people, that I'm all surface, no substance." He laughed hollowly. 5 years of playing her political games, and she feeds me that new age garbage. I remained silent, uncertain what response he wanted. "The worst part?" he continued, anger building in his voice. "She spent 10 minutes talking about how impressed she was with your father, how his authentic approach to business was refreshing, as if a mechanic who got lucky with real estate has anything to teach Pinnacle Investments." And there it was, the mask slipping, revealing the same old prejudice beneath. "My father didn't get lucky," I said quietly. "He worked incredibly hard and made smart decisions based on values you don't even recognize." "Values?" James scoffed. "Is that what we're calling it now?" The car pulled up to our building, and I got out without waiting for James. In the elevator, we stood on opposite sides, the distance between us far greater than the physical space. Inside our condo, James headed straight for the bar, pouring himself a generous scotch. I slipped off my heels, suddenly exhausted by more than just the late hour. "What did your mother mean when she said you need to talk tomorrow?" James asked. Abruptly. I shrugged. "I don't know. Family matters? Probably." "Family matters," he repeated, taking a long drink. "Like the fact that your father now has leverage over my entire career?" "That's not how my father operates," I said firmly. "He doesn't use people." "Everyone uses leverage, Emma. Some people are just more honest about it than others." I studied him, this man I had married, this person I had centered my life around for 7 years. Had he always been this cynical, this calculating? Or had I simply refused to see it? "I'm going to bed," I announced, unwilling to engage further. "Fine, I'll be working. Someone has to salvage this disaster." I paused at the bedroom doorway. "It's one setback." "James, not the end of the world." "Easy for you to say," he muttered. "Your family's suddenly on top while mine is." He didn't finish the thought, but he didn't need to. I closed the bedroom door behind me, leaning against it as tears threatened. Not for James's career disappointment, but for the realization that nothing had really changed. One dinner, one revelation about my family's wealth, and already we were back to the same dynamic. James viewing my family as somehow less than, even when evidence proved otherwise. I changed out of my gown mechanically, hanging it carefully before slipping into my night clothes. As I washed my face, removing the careful makeup I'd applied hours earlier, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "You okay, Mija?" James seemed upset after the announcement. I typed back, "He's disappointed. We'll talk tomorrow." Her reply came quickly. "Remember who you are, Emma. A Reyes before a Mitchell. Strong, smart, worthy." A lump formed in my throat. How many times had my mother reminded me of my worth over the years? How many times had I needed that reminder because James had made me doubt it? I slept fitfully, waking to an empty bed and the sounds of James moving around the condo. Glancing at the clock, 6:30 a.m., I rose and pulled on my robe. In the living room, James sat surrounded by papers, his laptop open, still wearing his dress shirt and slacks from the night before. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled from repeatedly running his hands through it. "Did you sleep at all?" I asked, pausing at the threshold. "Couldn't," he replied without looking up. "Too much to figure out." I moved to the kitchen, starting the coffee maker. "What are you working on?" "Contingency plans. Options." He finally glanced up. His expression hardened into something I didn't recognize. "Damage control." "James, it's one promotion. There will be others." Laughed an ugly sound. "You don't get it, do you? This wasn't just a promotion. This was the promotion. The one that sets the trajectory for everything else." He gestured to the papers strewn about. 5 years of work, worthless now. I have to completely recalculate. I brought him a mug of coffee, setting it on the side table. Maybe this is an opportunity to reassess, to think about what really matters. "What matters?" he repeated, his tone scathing. "Let me tell you what matters, Emma. Success matters. Position matters. Respect matters. And family? Does that matter?" His eyes met mine, something cold and calculating in them. "Family is a tool, like everything else." I see that clearly now. A chill ran through me. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, setting aside his papers, "that I've been approaching this all wrong. Your father's position as part owner of our building is leverage. Victoria clearly respects him. That's an angle I haven't been utilizing properly." I stared at him in disbelief. "My father is not an angle to be utilized, James. He's a person. My person." "Don't be naive," James snapped. "Everyone uses everyone. That's how the world works. That's how success happens." "Not in my world," I said quietly. "Not in my family's world." "Your family," he scoffed. "Suddenly they're business geniuses because they got lucky with some real estate?" And there it was again. The contempt barely hidden beneath the surface, revealed in a moment of stress. "My father built his success from nothing," I said, my voice steady despite the anger rising within me. "He worked 16-hour days fixing cars when I was growing up. He saved every penny, made smart investments, built relationships based on respect. Don't you dare diminish what he's accomplished." James waved a dismissive hand. "You've never respected my family," I said, the realization washing over me like cold water. "Not really. Last night wasn't about making amends. It was about using them for your benefit." James sighed dramatically, as if I were a child failing to understand a simple concept. "Emma, business is business. Your father has something I need. Now, influence with Victoria. What's wrong with leveraging that?" "Everything is wrong with it," I replied, my voice growing stronger. My father isn't a stepping stone for your ambition. Why not? James stood now, agitation making him pace. He'd benefit too. I could help him maximize his investment in the building, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Stop talking about him like he's some naive investor who needs your financial expertise. He's been in business longer than you've been alive. James laughed, the sound sharp and condescending. Running an auto shop isn't exactly high finance, Emma. I stood perfectly still, suddenly seeing with absolute clarity the man I had married. All these years, I'd made excuses for his behavior, justifying his thinly veiled disdain for my background, as stress or ambition or the product of his privileged upbringing. But the truth was simpler and uglier. James believed himself superior to my family. Always had, always would. I'm going to my parents' house, I said quietly. That caught his attention. What? Why? My mother asked me to come by this morning. They wanted to talk about something. His expression shifted, calculation replacing irritation. Good idea. Feel them out about the lease situation. Your father mentioned it expires soon. I stared at him, incredulous. I'm not going to spy. For you, James. It's not spying, he protested. It's gathering information that could benefit us both. If Pinnacle's lease terms change, it affects our future too. Our future, I repeated. Is that all you think about? The next rung on the ladder? Someone has to, he shot back. You're content with your little foundation job and weekend family visits, but I have bigger plans for us. The dismissal of my career, my passion, stung, but it wasn't new. James had always treated my work with the Westlake Community Foundation as a charming hobby, not a meaningful contribution. I'll be back later, I said, turning toward the bedroom to change. Don't wait up. Don't say anything to your father about Pinnacle that could complicate things, James called after me. This situation requires delicacy. I closed the bedroom door without responding, leaning against it as I took several deep breaths. 7 years of marriage, and somehow I'd never fully seen the depth of James's disrespect until now. Or perhaps I'd seen it but chosen to ignore it, to accommodate it, to work around it. Not anymore. I dressed quickly in jeans and a soft sweater, the casual clothes feeling like armor after weeks of James-approved outfits for various corporate functions. Before leaving, I checked my phone to find another text from my mother. Coming by today? Dad made chilaquiles. The mention of my father's specialty breakfast brought an unexpected lump to my throat. Some of my earliest memories were of standing on a step stool in our kitchen, watching him prepare this dish on lazy Sunday mornings, explaining each step as if it were sacred knowledge passed through generations. I replied, on my way. Need to talk. Outside, the morning was crisp, winter sunshine bright but offering little warmth. I opted to walk the few blocks to the nearest coffee shop and order a rideshare from there, needing time to clear my head before seeing my parents. The coffee shop was busy with weekend customers, conversations and espresso machine noises creating a comforting background hum. I ordered a latte and found a small table by the window to wait for my ride. Emma? Emma Mitchell? I looked up to see May Wong, Tyler's wife, approaching with a coffee cup in hand. May, hi. I stood to greet her with a quick hug. Congratulations again to Tyler. The promotion is well deserved. May smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Thank you. It was. Unexpected. Tyler was sure James would get it. James, we'll be fine, I said automatically, the response trained into me after years of being the supportive corporate wife. May glanced around before asking, Mind if I join you for a minute? Please. I gestured to the empty chair opposite mine. She sat, setting her cup down carefully. I wanted to check on you, actually. Things seemed tense last night. I blinked in surprise. May and I were friendly but not close. our relationship defined by our husband's connection rather than any personal bond. "I'm fine," I said, the automatic response again. Then, reconsidering, "Actually, no. Things are complicated right now." May nodded, understanding in her eyes. I can imagine. Tyler was shocked by Victoria's decision. He said James was the obvious choice, had been promised the position essentially. "That's what James believed," I confirmed, sipping my latte. "Tyler thinks." May hesitated, lowering her voice. "He thinks Victoria changed her mind after meeting your father." My cup froze halfway to my lips. "What?" May leaned forward. Apparently, she was impressed by him. Really impressed. She told the board he represents the kind of authentic leadership Pinnacle should cultivate more of. "But my father doesn't even work in finance," I said, bewildered. "Exactly. He built something real, from the ground up. Victoria's been talking about changing Pinnacle's culture, bringing in different perspectives." Me shrugged. "Tyler thinks she saw your father as the model for what she wants, and James as, well, the opposite," I finished. The irony was almost too perfect. James's carefully constructed image of success, the very thing he'd used to make my family feel inadequate, was precisely what had cost him the promotion. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," May admitted. "But I've always thought you deserved better than how Pinnacle treats the partner's spouses. Like, we're decorative objects instead of people with our own values and accomplishments." I studied her with new appreciation. May had always been quiet at company functions, and I'd mistaken that for shyness or discomfort. Now I recognized it as careful observation. "Thank you for telling me," I said sincerely. She smiled, more genuinely, this time. "Women should look out for each other in these environments. They're designed to isolate us." My rideshare app pinged with a notification of the driver's approach. I gathered my things, but paused before standing. "May? Congratulations again. Tyler is lucky to have you in his corner." "And James is lucky to have you," she replied, "whether he realizes it or not." That was the question, wasn't it? Did James realize what he had in me? Or was I simply another acquisition, another marker of his carefully constructed success story? The drive to Riverdale took about 20 minutes, the cityscape gradually giving way to more modest neighborhoods with actual front yards and children playing on sidewalks. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had, a well-maintained two-story with my mother's flower beds dormant for winter and my father's immaculate driveway free of snow and ice. As I approached the front door, it swung open before I could knock. My mother stood there, as if she'd been watching for me. "Mija," she said simply, opening her arms. I stepped into her embrace, the familiar scent of her perfume, the same one she'd worn my entire life, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, sensing my distress. "Nothing," I lied, pulling back to smile at her. "Just tired. Long night." She studied my face, clearly not believing me but choosing not to press. "Come in. Your father's in the kitchen finishing breakfast." The house smelled of coffee and chilaquiles, warm and inviting. Family photos lined the hallway, my kindergarten graduation, Daniel's college acceptance, my parents' 25th anniversary trip to Mexico City. The visual timeline of a family that celebrated each other's accomplishments without qualification. In the kitchen, my father stood at the stove, expertly flipping strips of tortilla in a sizzling pan. He looked up when I entered, his face breaking into a wide smile. "Emma, just in time." He turned off the burner and wiped his hands on a dish towel before enveloping me in a bear hug. "Smells amazing, Dad," I said, returning his embrace. "Sit." "Sit?" he insisted, guiding me to the kitchen table. "Coffee?" "Please." My mother joined us, bringing plates and silverware. The familiar ritual of a family breakfast unfolded, my father serving generous portions, my mother ensuring everyone had everything they needed, conversation flowing easily between topics. For a while, we simply enjoyed the food and each other's company. I found myself relaxing for the first time in days, the tension that permanently resided between my shoulder blades when I was with James gradually easing. "So," my father finally said, pushing his empty plate away with satisfaction. "What did James think of last night's announcement?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. He was disappointed, obviously. He really thought the position was his. My parents exchanged glances, that silent communication again. "Victoria Barnes is a smart woman," my father observed. "She sees more than most people realize." "What do you mean?" He smiled slightly. "I've done my research on Pinnacle since learning they were a tenant. Victoria has been quietly transforming the firm. More diversity in hiring, more community investment, less of the old boys club mentality." "James represents the old guard," my mother added bluntly. "All polish, no substance." I winced. It wasn't untrue, but hearing it stated so plainly hurt nonetheless. "Your husband has many fine qualities," my father said, more diplomatically. "But authenticity isn't one of them." "Dad," I protested weakly. "It's not a criticism, Emma. It's an observation. The man I met last night was performing, playing a role he thought would impress me because of what I own, not who I am." I couldn't argue with that assessment. It was exactly what James had been doing. "You said you needed to talk," I deflected, not ready to discuss James further. "About something important?" My parents exchanged another look before my mother nodded. "Yes, we have a proposition for you." "A professional one," my father clarified. "You know the investment group I mentioned? The one that purchased Oakwood Tower?" I nodded. "We're establishing a foundation arm, a way to channel some of our profits into community development. Real estate investment often displaces people, drives up costs in neighborhoods. We want to counterbalance that." My interest was piqued. Community development was exactly what I focused on at the Westlake Foundation. "The board unanimously voted to offer you the executive director position," my mother continued. "Given your experience, your connections, and your passion for this work." I sat back, stunned. "You want me to run your foundation?" "You're the most qualified person we know," my father said simply. "And yes, you're my daughter, but this isn't nepotism. Everyone on the board reviewed your work independently before voting." "The salary would be double what you're making now," my mother added, "with full autonomy over programming and grants." My mind raced. It was a dream opportunity, the kind of position I'd always hoped to reach eventually, but had assumed was years away. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," my father suggested. "Take some time to think it through. Talk to James." The mention of my husband brought reality crashing back. James would hate this. He'd see it as charity from my family, as undermining his position as the primary breadwinner, as evidence that my parents were trying to control our lives. "When would you need an answer?" I asked. "End of next week?" my mother suggested. "We're hoping to announce the foundation's launch next month." I nodded, grateful for the breathing room. "I'll think about it. It's an amazing opportunity." "One more thing," my father said, his expression turning serious. "This position would require you to work directly with Victoria Barnes occasionally. Pinnacle is establishing a partnership with several downtown development projects." Of course, it was. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "Would that be a problem?" my mother asked carefully. "Given James's situation?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I'll need to discuss it with him." Though I already knew how that conversation would go. James would either forbid me from taking the position outright or insist I use it as an opportunity to advance his interests at Pinnacle. Neither option sat well with me. After breakfast, my brother Daniel arrived, his energy filling the house immediately. At 26, he was the spitting image of our father in his youth. Same warm eyes, same confident stride. Unlike me, Daniel had never left Riverdale, choosing instead to modernize the family business while remaining deeply connected to the community. "Sis," he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "Heard you brought the fancy husband to the fancy dinner. How'd that go?" "Daniel?" our mother warned. He grinned, unrepentant. "What?" "We can't pretend we don't all know James looks down on us." "He's making an effort," I defended automatically, then stopped myself. Why was I still making excuses for James? Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Right, because he found out Dad's his landlord." "That's enough," our father said firmly. "James is Emma's husband, and we respect her choices." Daniel held up his hands in surrender. "Sorry, sis. You know I just want you to be happy." "I know," I said, squeezing his hand. "And I am." Was I, though? The question lingered as we moved to the living room, settling into the comfortable familiarity of family conversation. Daniel shared stories about the auto shop's expansion. My parents discussed their upcoming trip to visit relatives in Mexico, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Updates?" No greeting, no questions about my family or how I was doing. Just a demand for information that might benefit him. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. "Everything okay?" my mother asked, observant as always. "Fine," I assured her. "Just James checking in." She studied me for a moment. "You know you can always talk to us, Emma, about anything." "I know, Mom. Really, everything's fine." The lie tasted bitter, but I wasn't ready to admit, to them or to myself, how broken my marriage had become. Or perhaps how broken it had always been, beneath the polished surface we presented to the world. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself reluctant to leave. This house, these people, they represented safety and acceptance in a way my own. Home no longer did. When had that happened? When had my condo with James become a place I dreaded returning to? "I should get going," I finally said around 3, though the words felt heavy. "Think about our offer," my father reminded me as he walked me to the door. "No pressure, but know that it's a real opportunity, not family charity." I nodded, kissing his cheek. "I will, Dad. Thank you for believing in me." "Always have, always will," he replied simply. Outside, I decided to walk for a while before calling a ride. The Riverdale neighborhood was quiet on this winter afternoon. Occasional children's laughter drifting from backyards or the small park at the center of the community. I found myself at that park almost without conscious decision, sitting on a bench overlooking the empty playground. My phone buzzed again. "James. Call me. Important developments." I sighed but dialed his number. He answered immediately. "Finally," he said without preamble. "Where have you been all day?" "With my family, as I told you this morning." Right. "Listen, we need to talk strategy. Tyler called. He wants to meet for drinks tonight. Says he has information about Victoria's decision that could help me reposition." "James," I said wearily. "Maybe it's time to accept the promotion went to someone else and move forward." "Move forward?" He sounded incredulous. "This is a setback, not a death sentence. I just need to approach it differently." "What does that mean?" "It means I've been thinking about your father's position, the leverage it gives us. Tyler says Victoria is obsessed with community development, local investment, all that PR-friendly nonsense." My stomach tightened. "It's not nonsense, James. It's important work." Sure, he dismissed. "The point is, your father's..." Investment group could be positioned as exactly the James, I interrupted, my patience finally evaporating. I don't want to use my father as leverage for your career. You're not thinking clearly, he replied, his tone shifting to the one he used when explaining supposedly complex concepts to me. This isn't about using anyone. It's about mutually beneficial relationships. Business 101. My relationship with my father isn't business, I insisted. It's family. Fine, James sighed dramatically. When will you be home? We need to discuss this properly. I glanced at my watch. I'm not sure. I might have dinner with Daniel. Emma, this is important. Tyler specifically mentioned that Victoria has another meeting with your father scheduled for Monday morning. I need to prepare. Prepare for what? It's their meeting, not yours. Don't be obtuse, James snapped. This affects my career trajectory, our future. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by the circular conversation. I'll be home when... I'm home, James. We can talk then. I ended the call before he could protest further, silencing my phone as it immediately began to ring again. The peaceful park now seemed to mock me with its simplicity. Children playing without agenda, parents watching without calculation, life unfolding without strategic positioning. Despite what I'd told James, I had no plans with Daniel. Instead, I found myself walking toward downtown Riverdale, drawn to the small business district that had been revitalized in recent years. The auto shop, Reyes Automotive, occupied a prominent corner lot, its brick facade freshly painted, its large windows showcasing a modern reception area that contrasted with the vintage sign above the door. The bell chimed as I entered, and Manuel, my father's longest-serving mechanic, looked up from the computer at the front desk. "Miss Emma," he exclaimed with genuine pleasure. "What brings you by on a Saturday?" "Just in the neighborhood," I replied with a smile. "Is Daniel around?" "In the back office working on some new marketing thing. Go on through." I made my way past the surprisingly busy shop floor, nodding to familiar faces as I went. My brother's office, formerly a small storage room that he'd transformed into a modern workspace, had its door ajar, music playing softly inside. "Knock, knock," I called, pushing the door open wider. Daniel looked up from his computer, surprise quickly replaced by a grin. "Twice in one day?" "I'm honored. Don't tell me you escaped the Mitchell mansion for that long without permission." I rolled my eyes, dropping into the chair opposite his desk. "Don't start." His expression softened as he studied my face. "That bad, huh?" "What do you mean?" "Come on, Em. I know that look. It's the same one you had when you were 10 and Sophia Martinez said your science project was stupid, but you pretended it didn't hurt." I laughed despite myself. "I forgot how annoyingly perceptive you are." "It's a gift," he agreed, leaning back in his chair. "So what's going on, for real this time?" Maybe it was the familiar surroundings, or Daniel's genuine concern, or simply the accumulated weight of too many realizations in too short a time. But suddenly the walls I'd carefully constructed around my marriage crumbled. "I don't think James respects me," I said quietly. "Or any of us. I don't think he ever has." Daniel's expression remained neutral, but his eyes flashed with something like vindication. "Go on." "Last night at the dinner, he didn't get the promotion he was counting on. When we got home, he immediately started talking about using Dad's position as building owner to leverage his way back into Victoria's good graces." I shook my head, the words bitter on my tongue. He sees Dad as a tool, not a person. "And this surprises you because—" Daniel let the question hang. I sighed. "It doesn't, I guess. Not really. But seeing it so clearly, without any pretense." I trailed off, unable to articulate the specific pain of having long-held suspicions. "Confirmed. You deserve better, sis," Daniel said simply. "You always have." "It's not that simple. We're married. We have a life together. Do you, though? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. From what I see, you have separate lives that occasionally intersect when it's convenient for him. The blunt assessment stung, partly because of its accuracy. You don't see everything, Daniel. True, he acknowledged. But I see how you change when you're around him, how you get smaller, more careful. He gestured to me now. And I see how you are here, with us. Present. Real. I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. Mom and Dad told me about the foundation position. Daniel's face brightened. It's perfect for you. Are you going to take it? I don't know. James won't like it. So? So he's my husband, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. His opinion matters. Does yours? Daniel challenged. When was the last time your opinion actually influenced a decision James made about his career, your life together? Anything important? I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. When had James last deferred to my preferences? When had he last compromised on anything significant? I couldn't remember a single instance. That's not fair, I protested weakly. Marriage is complicated. It shouldn't be that complicated, Daniel countered. Dad and Mom have been married 30 years, and I've never seen either of them diminish the other the way James diminishes you. The comparison hit home. My parents' marriage was a true partnership, each supporting the other's dreams, celebrating successes, navigating challenges together. When had James ever truly celebrated my accomplishments? When had he ever put my needs above his own? I need to think, I said finally. Everything's happening so fast. Daniel reached across the desk to squeeze my hand. Take all the time you need, but remember that you always have options, Emma. Always. I left the auto shop feeling both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having voiced my doubts, heavier with the responsibility of deciding what to do about them. The winter day was fading into early darkness as I finally ordered a rideshare back to the condo, my mind churning with possibilities and fears. James was waiting when I arrived, pacing the living room with a drink in hand. He looked up sharply. When I entered, relief quickly replaced by irritation. Where have you been? I've been calling for hours. I silenced my phone, I replied, hanging my coat in the closet. I needed time to think. Think about what? Emma, we have a situation here that requires immediate attention. I turned to face him fully. No, James, you have a situation. I have a family and a job offer to consider. He blinked momentarily, thrown off his script. Job offer? What job offer? My father's investment group is launching a community development foundation. They've asked me to be the executive director. For a moment, James was speechless, processing this new information. Then his face took on the calculating expression I was coming to dread. That's, interesting timing, he said slowly. Very interesting. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, he replied with forced casualness. Just noting the convenient timing. Your father acquires my company's building. I lose a promotion, and suddenly there's a prestigious position waiting for you. He took a sip of his drink. Connect the dots, Emma. Anger flared hot and unexpected. The dots? What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm observing a pattern of events that seems engineered to shift power dynamics. His voice was cool, analytical. It's actually quite impressive, strategically speaking. You think my father orchestrated buying your building and offering me a job just to, what? Make you feel less important? James shrugged one shoulder. People have gone to greater lengths for less. I stared at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time. This man, who viewed everything through the lens of power and manipulation, who couldn't conceive of actions motivated by anything other than strategic advantage, was a stranger to me. Not everyone thinks like you, James, I said quietly. Some people do things because they're right, not because they're advantageous. Noble sentiment, he replied with a thin smile. Naive, but noble. Is that how you see me? Naive? I see you as someone who doesn't fully understand how the world works, he said carefully. Which isn't your fault. You were raised with different values. Different from what? Manipulation? Constant calculation of advantage? James sighed, setting down his glass. You're being emotional. Can we discuss this rationally? Oh, I'm being perfectly rational, I countered. I'm rationally observing that my husband thinks my family has orchestrated an elaborate plot against him, rather than accepting that maybe, just maybe, his own actions contributed to losing a promotion. His jaw tightened. Victoria made the wrong choice. Everyone knows it. Do they? Or is that just what you need to believe? Tyler himself said, I don't care what Tyler said, I interrupted. I care that you're so wrapped up in your professional disappointment that you can't even consider the foundation position might be a wonderful opportunity for me. James paused, visibly recalibrating. Of course it's a good opportunity for you, he said, his tone softening. I never said it wasn't. You immediately assumed it was about you, about undermining you. I was surprised, that's all. He moved toward me, reaching for my hand. Let's start over. Tell me about this position. I allowed him to lead me to the sofa, though I maintained a deliberate distance between us. It's exactly the kind of work I'm passionate about. Community, development, affordable housing initiatives, educational support programs. The salary is double what I'm making now, with full autonomy over programming. James nodded encouragingly. Sounds impressive. And I assume you'd be working closely with your father's investment group? Yes, and with community partners including… I hesitated. Including, James prompted, Pinnacle Investments. There's apparently a partnership forming with several downtown development projects. Understanding dawned in his eyes. So, you'd be working directly with Victoria? Potentially, yes. James sat back, something like genuine admiration crossing his face. Now I see it. Brilliant, actually. See what? The play. Your father puts you in position to influence Victoria directly, bypassing the normal corporate hierarchy. He shook his head, smiling slightly. I wouldn't have thought Miguel had that kind of strategic thinking in him. It's not a play, I said through gritted teeth. It's a job offer based on my qualifications and experience. Of course it is, James agreed too readily. But it also happens to create a direct line of influence that benefits your family's interests and, by extension, mine. I can't have this conversation, I said, standing abruptly. You're incapable of seeing anything except through the lens of advantage and manipulation. I'm seeing opportunity, James corrected, rising as well. For both of us. You get a prestigious position with more money and authority. I get a connection to Victoria outside the normal channels. Your father gets a trusted family member managing his foundation. Everyone wins. Put that way, it sounded so reasonable, so logical. But something fundamental was missing from his analysis. Something about dignity, autonomy, respect. Would you support me taking this position even if it didn't potentially benefit your career? I asked directly. James hesitated just a fraction too long before saying, Of course. You had to think about it, I observed. That's my answer right there. Emma, be reasonable. Of course I support your career. I always have. No, you've tolerated my career as long as it didn't interfere with yours. There's a difference. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. What do you want from me? I'm saying take the job. It's a great opportunity. I want you to see me, I said simply. not as an extension of yourself or a tool for your advancement, as a person with my own ambitions and value. This is absurd. Of course I see you. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you view me the same way you view my family, as something to be managed, positioned, utilized. James's expression hardened. That's unfair, and you know it. Is it? Yesterday you referred to my father as just a mechanic. Today, now that you see how he might be useful to you, he's a strategic genius. Your respect isn't respect at all. It's calculation. You're twisting my words. I'm finally hearing them clearly, I countered. And I don't like what they're telling me about our marriage. A tense silence stretched between us, filled with years of accumulated resentments and misunderstandings. James broke it first, his voice deliberately calm. You're upset. We both are. It's been a challenging weekend with the promotion decision, and now this job offer. Let's table this discussion until we've both had time to think more clearly. It was his standard approach to conflict. Postpone, deflect, then proceed as if nothing had happened. Usually I acquiesced, grateful for the reprieve from confrontation, but not this time. No, I said firmly. I don't want to table it. I want to resolve it. Fine, he replied, his patience visibly wearing thin. What exactly do you want to resolve? I want to understand if you've ever truly respected me or my family, or if we've always been props in the narrative you've constructed about your life. James stared at me, genuine confusion in his eyes. Where is this coming from? We've been married for 7 years. If you felt this way, why wait until now to bring it up? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself all day. Because I didn't see it clearly until now. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. See what exactly? The pattern. The constant, subtle digs about my family's background. The way you position yourself as having rescued me from a life of teaching kindergarten. The fact that my parents have never once been invited to our home. My voice grew stronger with each example. The way everything, is evaluated based on how it affects your career, your status, your plans. James had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I've never claimed to be perfect, Emma, but I've given you a good life. You've given me the life you wanted, I corrected, not necessarily the one I would have chosen. And what would you have chosen? He challenged. To stay in Riverdale? To keep teaching 5-year-olds for barely enough money to pay rent? Maybe. Or maybe something entirely different. But it would have been my choice, not one made for me. James shook his head, exasperation evident. I can't believe we're having this conversation now, of all times, when I need your support most. And there it was, the fundamental truth of our relationship. My role was to support him, to advance his interests, to fit into the spaces left after his needs were met. Never the reverse. I'm taking the foundation position, I said suddenly, the decision crystallizing in that moment. James studied my face, gauging my resolve. Okay, he said carefully. We can make that work, but we need to be strategic about how— No, I interrupted. I'm taking it for me. Not as part of some coordinated effort to benefit your career. Just for me. Because it's what I want. Emma, and I'm going to stay with my parents for a few days. I continued, the words coming more easily now. I need space to think about what I want from this marriage going forward. Alarm flashed across his features. You're leaving? Now? Over one disagreement? It's not one disagreement, James. It's 7 years of the same fundamental disconnect. About what our partnership should be. You're overreacting, he insisted. If this is about the promotion, I'll recover professionally. If it's about the job offer, I already said take it. It's about the fact that you immediately assumed my father's job offer was part of some scheme against you, I replied. It's about the fact that you can't conceive of my family's actions being motivated by anything other than strategic advantage. I never said, you didn't have to say it. It's in every interaction, every dismissive comment, every time you check your watch at their house or make excuses to leave early. James paced the room, agitation evident in every movement. So what? You're just going to throw away our marriage because I'm not sufficiently enthusiastic about your parents? I'm not throwing away anything, I said calmly. I'm taking time to evaluate what we actually have. James stopped pacing, his expression shifting from frustration to calculation. This is about the promotion, isn't it? You see me as less valuable now that I've experienced a setback. The accusation was so absurd, so perfectly illustrative of how he viewed relationships, that I actually laughed. Is that how little you think of me? That I'd leave because you didn't get a title? Then why now? He demanded. Why this sudden crisis after 7 years? Because seeing how you reacted to my family's success showed me exactly what you think of us, I replied, simply, and it's not something I can unsee. I moved toward our bedroom, intent on packing a bag before my resolve wavered. James followed, watching from the doorway as I pulled a suitcase from the closet. This is ridiculous, he said. You're acting impulsively. No, I'm finally acting for myself. I placed the suitcase on the bed and began filling it with essentials. I've spent 7 years accommodating your ambitions, your preferences, your vision of what our life should be. I need to figure out what I want. And you can't do that here, with your husband? I paused, turning to face him. Would you actually listen? Or would you strategize how to shape my wants into something that fits your plan? His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said quietly, returning to my packing. You know what? James's voice took on a harder edge. Fine, go stay with your parents. Take the job. See how it feels to make decisions without considering me at all. That's just it, James. I always consider you. Always. I'm just not sure you do the same for me. He scoffed. Everything I do is for us. For our future. No, I corrected gently. Everything you do is for your future. I'm just expected to fit into it. I zipped the suitcase closed with finality. James stepped aside as I wheeled it past him, his expression a complex mix of anger, confusion, and something that might have been fear. In the living room, I gathered my purse and phone, pausing to look back at the perfectly appointed space that had never felt like a true home. James leaned against the wall, arms crossed defensively. How long will this break last? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. I don't know, I answered honestly. I need time to think clearly, away from. I gestured vaguely at our surroundings, at the life we'd built that suddenly felt like a beautifully constructed facade. And what am I supposed to tell people? My colleagues? Victoria? Of course that would be his first concern. Appearances? Professional implications. Tell them whatever you want, I said. The truth? A lie? Some strategic narrative that positions you advantageously. That's what you do best, isn't it? His jaw tightened. That's unfair. Maybe, I acknowledged. But it feels true right now. I picked up my suitcase and moved toward the door, half expecting him to try to stop me, to fight harder for us. Instead, he remained where he was, watching with that calculating expression I'd come to dread. If you leave now, he said quietly, things will change between us. It wasn't quite a threat, but the implication was clear. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Things have already changed, James. I'm just finally acknowledging it. With that, I walked out, letting the door close softly behind me. In the Daiya elevator down to the lobby, I expected to feel panic or regret, but instead found myself breathing more easily than I had in months. Whatever came next would be difficult, messy, potentially painful, but it would be real, not the carefully curated performance that had become my marriage. Outside, the evening air was crisp with early winter, the city lights glowing against the darkening sky. I pulled out my phone and ordered a rideshare to my parents' house, then sent my mother a brief text. "Coming to stay for a few days. Will explain when I arrive." Her response was immediate and typical. "Your room is ready. There's food. No questions, no judgment, just acceptance and support." The contrast with James's reaction couldn't have been more stark. The ride to Riverdale passed in a blur of city streets giving way to quieter neighborhoods. When we arrived at my parents' house, the porch light was on, a beacon of welcome in the darkness. I paid the driver and wheeled my suitcase up the familiar walkway, feeling both like a failure and like someone awakening from a long sleep. My mother opened the door before I could knock. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. She simply pulled me into her arms, holding me as the emotions I'd been suppressing finally surfaced. "It's okay, mija," she murmured, stroking my hair like she had when I was a child. "You're home now." And I was. The next morning, I woke in my childhood bedroom, momentarily disoriented by the familiar surroundings. Sunlight filtered through the curtains I'd chosen as a teenager, casting patterns on walls still decorated with framed certificates and photos from another life. For several minutes, I simply lay there, processing the events of the past few days, and the decision I'd made. My phone, plugged in on the nightstand, showed several missed calls and texts from James. I ignored them for now, not ready to engage with his particular brand of logical manipulation. Instead, I scrolled to an email that had arrived late last night from Victoria Barnes, with the subject line, "Foundation position, congratulations." Curious, I opened it. "Emma, Miguel mentioned he's offered you the executive director position for the new Community Development Foundation." I wanted to personally express my enthusiasm for this possibility. Your work with the Westlake Foundation has been impressive, and I believe you're exactly what this initiative needs. I look forward to potentially working together on several projects in the coming year. If you decide to accept, perhaps we could meet for coffee next week to discuss areas of collaboration between Pinnacle and the Foundation. Regardless of your decision, I wish you all the best. Victoria. I read the email twice, somewhat stunned by its warmth and the professional respect it conveyed. In 7 years of being married to James, Victoria had never addressed me directly, never acknowledged my work or capabilities. Yet here she was, reaching out colleague to colleague, separate from any connection to my husband. A knock at the Docker interrupted my thoughts. "Emma, coffee's ready when you are," my father called. "Be right there," I replied, setting the phone aside and stretching before getting up. Downstairs, my parents were already at the kitchen table, my father reading the newspaper the old-fashioned way, in print, while my mother finished a crossword puzzle. The normalcy of the scene was comforting. "Good morning," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee before joining them. "Sleep okay?" my mother asked, studying my face with the careful attention only a parent can master. "Better than I expected," I admitted. My father set down his paper. "Want to talk about it?" I took a deep breath, then told them everything. James's reaction to the promotion loss, his immediate attempt to use my father's position for leverage, his dismissive attitude toward the foundation offer except as it might benefit him. I finished with our argument and my decision to leave, at least temporarily. When I was done, my parents exchanged one of their communicative glances. "I'm sorry, mija," my father said finally. "Marriage troubles are never easy, no matter the circumstances." "Are you upset with me?" I asked, suddenly feeling like a child seeking parental approval. My mother reached across the table to take my hand. "Why would we be upset? You're doing what you need to do for yourself." But I failed. My marriage is falling apart. "Emma," my father said gently, A marriage takes two people committed to each other's happiness and growth. If only one person is doing that work, it's not a partnership. You haven't failed, my mother added firmly. You've finally decided to value yourself as much as we value you. Tears stung my eyes at their unconditional support. I don't know what happens next. No one ever does, my father replied with a small smile. That's life. But whatever you decide, we're here. After breakfast, I retreated to the backyard, bundled against the winter chill, needing space to think. My phone buzzed with another text from James. We need to talk. This silence is childish and unproductive. Typical. Any behavior that didn't conform to his preferences was labeled immature or irrational. I was about to put the phone away again when it rang. Not James. This time, but Victoria Barnes. Surprised, I answered. Emma, thank you for picking up, Victoria said, her voice warm but professional. I hope I'm not interrupting your weekend. Not at all, I assured her, puzzled by the call. I sent an email last night but wanted to follow up personally. Your father speaks very highly of your work, and after reviewing your contributions to the Westlake Foundation, I share his enthusiasm. Thank you, I said, still wondering about the purpose of the call. I'll be direct, Victoria continued. I believe the foundation position would be perfect for you, and I'm eager to establish a working relationship. However, I'm aware of the complications that might arise given James's situation at Pinnacle. So that was it. She was concerned about professional boundaries and conflicts of interest. I understand your concerns, I began. Oh, I'm not concerned for myself, Victoria interrupted with a light laugh. I'm concerned for you. Working with your husband's company after he was passed over for promotion could create tensions. I wouldn't want that to impact your decision about a position you're clearly qualified for. Her consideration caught me off guard. That's very thoughtful. Honestly, Emma, I've always been impressed by you. You have a genuineness that's rare in our circles, much like your father. There was a pause before she added, If I may speak candidly, please do. I've worked with James for 5 years. He's technically brilliant, politically savvy, and extraordinarily ambitious. Another pause. But those aren't the qualities Pinnacle needs in leadership right now. We're shifting toward a more community-focused approach, emphasizing relationships over transactions. Tyler embodies that philosophy. James doesn't. I wasn't sure how to respond to such direct criticism of my husband, however accurate it might be. I hope that doesn't offend you, Victoria continued when I remained silent. I simply want to be transparent about why the promotion decision went as it did. It wasn't personal or arbitrary. I appreciate your honesty, I said, finally. And I understand the decision, even if James doesn't. Will you consider the foundation position? Your father mentioned you were still deciding. I am, I confirmed. It's a complex situation right now. Of course, Victoria said smoothly. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless. And Emma, whatever you decide, I hope we'll have the chance to work together in some capacity. I think we'd make a formidable team. After we said our goodbyes, I sat staring at the phone, processing the unexpected conversation. Victoria Barnes, the intimidating CEO who had barely acknowledged my existence for 7 years, had just offered me professional respect and something approaching personal regard. The world seemed to be realigning in ways I couldn't have predicted. I spent the rest of the morning researching the foundation position more thoroughly, reviewing similar initiatives in other cities, and mentally drafting a vision for what this organization could become. By lunchtime, I knew I wanted the job, not because of how it might affect James or my relationship with him, but because it aligned perfectly with my skills and passions. My father found me in the kitchen making a sandwich. Productive morning? He asked, noting the focused expression on my face. Very, I replied. I'm going to accept the foundation position. He smiled, clearly pleased, but trying not to show it too obviously. A good decision. The board will be thrilled. I just need to figure out how to navigate everything else, I admitted. James, our marriage, where I'm going to live, one step at a time, my father advised. Start with what you know for certain. The rest will follow. What I knew for certain was that I couldn't return to the life I'd been living, the careful tiptoeing around James's ego, the constant adjustment of my own needs to fit his vision. Whether that meant divorce or a fundamental restructuring of our relationship remained to be seen, but the status quo was no longer acceptable. Around mid-afternoon, my phone rang again. James. After letting it go to voicemail twice already, I decided it was time to talk. Hello, James. Finally, he said, exasperation evident. I've been trying to reach you all day. I needed space to think. And have you finished thinking? Or should I continue to wait for my wife to deign to communicate with me? The sarcasm was thick, defensive. I've decided to accept the foundation position, I said, ignoring the barb. A pause, then. I see. And were you planning to consult me at all about this decision that affects both our lives? The way you consulted me about the countless career decisions you've made over the years, I countered. Or the way you consulted me before telling, Victoria, my father was just a mechanic? That's ancient history, Emma, and completely different circumstances. Not to me, it isn't. James sighed heavily. Look, if you want the job, take it. I already said I support that. But this silent treatment, this running away to your parents' house, it's childish and unnecessary. It was necessary for me, I replied evenly. I needed distance to see our situation clearly. And what exactly do you see? His tone was challenging. I see that we want different things from this marriage. Maybe we always have. Meaning what? Meaning you want a supportive accessory who accommodates your ambitions without question. I want a partner who values my dreams as much as his own. Another silence, longer this time. When James spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. That's an unfair characterization. Maybe, I conceded, but it's how I feel right now. So what happens next? You stay with your parents indefinitely? We live separate lives? I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But I do know I can't go back to how things were. What if things could be different? James asked, an unfamiliar note of vulnerability creeping into his voice. What if I'm willing to adjust my perspective? The offer surprised me. James rarely admitted the possibility of being wrong about anything. What does that mean exactly? It means I've been thinking too. About what you said, about how I view your family. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been dismissive. Maybe. Fine, I have been, he admitted reluctantly. But people can change, Emma, if you give them reason to. Change shouldn't require an ultimatum, James. It should come from genuine respect and care. Then give me the chance to show you that respect, he urged. Don't make decisions about our future based on the past. Part of me wanted to believe him, to imagine that the events of the past few days had triggered genuine self-reflection. But the larger part, the part that had finally awakened to the reality of our relationship, remained skeptical. I need more time, I said finally. And I need to see actions, not just hear promises. James was silent for a moment, clearly not the response he'd hoped for. Fine, he said eventually. Take your time. But remember that relationships require compromise, from both sides. After we hung up, I sat in my childhood bedroom, turning the conversation over in my mind. Was James capable of the fundamental change our relationship would require? Did I even want to invest the emotional energy necessary to find out? Or was it time to accept that some differences were irreconcilable? The next day, Monday, brought clarity in unexpected ways. I was helping my mother with some garden prep for spring, enjoying the simple physicality of the work, when my phone buzzed with a text from Tyler's wife, May. "Are you okay? Heard you left. Here if you need to talk." I was touched by her concern, especially given her connection to James through Tyler. I replied with a simple thanks and assurance that I was fine, just taking some time to think. Her response was quick. "Understood. FYI, James at office today, saying everything normal. Declined partnership with Community Development Initiative Victoria proposed." That gave me pause. The Community Development Initiative was exactly the project my father's foundation would be partnering with, the one Victoria had mentioned in her call. If James was actively opposing it, what did that say about his claim to support my new position? I was still processing this information when my father arrived home early from a meeting, his expression unusually serious as he entered the kitchen where my mother and I were having tea. "Everything okay, Dad?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Fine," he assured me, kissing my mother's cheek before sitting down. "Just an interesting morning." He studied me for a moment. "I had a meeting with Pinnacle today, Victoria and several board members." "About the building lease?" "Partly," he nodded, "but mostly about the Community Development Initiative, the one the foundation will be partnering on." I thought of May's text. Was James there? "Yes," my father confirmed, though I got the impression he wasn't originally scheduled to attend. He seemed determined to be involved. "What happened?" I asked, a sense of foreboding growing. My father sighed, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. He presented a counter-proposal, suggested the initiative was misaligned with Pinnacle's core competencies, and offered an alternative that would, in his words, maximize shareholder value while maintaining the appearance of community investment. "The appearance," I repeated, the final illusion shattering. Even now, with everything at stake, James couldn't see beyond profit margins and strategic positioning. Victoria didn't appreciate his perspective, my father continued with diplomatic understatement. She reminded him rather forcefully that the decision had already been made at the board level. How did he react? "Not well," my father admitted. He suggested that perhaps she was being unduly influenced by personal connections rather than business sense. My mother's eyes widened. "He didn't." "He did," my father confirmed. "It was uncomfortable." "He was referring to you," I said, the realization bitter. "Implying Victoria's decision was based on her relationship with you rather than the merits of the project." My father nodded. "That was the implication, yes." "What did Victoria say?" A small smile touched my father's lips. "She suggested James take the rest of the day to reconsider his approach to teamwork and community partnership. Then she continued the meeting without him. The James I knew would consider this a devastating public humiliation. I could imagine his fury, his wounded pride, his immediate calculation of how to recover and retaliate. "I should call Victoria," I said, reaching for my phone. "Apologize for James's behavior." "Why?" my mother asked simply. "You're not responsible for his actions." The question stopped me. Why indeed? When had I started assuming responsibility? For James's behavior? His words? His professional missteps? It was an uncomfortable recognition of how thoroughly I'd internalized my role as his supporter, his buffer, his diplomat. "You're right," I acknowledged. "I'm not." Later that afternoon, as the early winter sunset painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, my phone rang with James's number. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but decided direct communication was better. "Hello?" "We need to talk," James said without preamble. his voice tight with controlled anger. Now, in person. I'm not coming home tonight, James. I told you I need time. This isn't about that, he snapped. This is about your father interfering in my career. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath before responding. My father didn't interfere in anything. He attended a meeting he was invited to. Don't play? Naive, Emma. He deliberately undermined me in front of Victoria and the board. By what? Participating in a community development initiative? By leveraging his position as building owner to push an agenda that conflicts with Pinnacle's priorities, James replied, each word precise and clipped. Those priorities weren't established by you, I pointed out. Victoria and the board made their decision. You're the one trying to undermine it. I'm trying to protect the firm's financial interests, he countered. Something your father wouldn't understand, given his limited business experience. And there it was again, the fundamental dismissal, the unshakable belief in his own superiority. Despite everything that had happened, despite my walking out, despite Victoria's clear preference for a different approach, James remained convinced of his rightness. My father built a successful business from nothing, I said quietly. He's made smart investments that have created wealth not just for himself, but for his employees and community. Don't talk to me about his limited business experience. Emma. No, James. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done defending my family to you. I'm done pretending your way is the only valid approach to business or life or anything else. So that's it? He demanded. 7 years of marriage and you're just walking away? I don't know what I'm doing yet, I admitted. But I know I can't be with someone who fundamentally disrespects the people I love. And by extension, me. This is ridiculous, James scoffed. One business disagreement and suddenly I'm the villain? It's not one disagreement. It's a pattern that's existed our entire relationship. I just couldn't see it clearly until now. Couldn't see it, or chose not to. His tone turned accusatory. You were happy enough with our life when it benefited you. The condo, the social status, the financial security. Now suddenly it's all beneath you? The attack was so fundamentally unfair that it momentarily robbed me of response. When had I ever prioritized those things? When had I ever indicated they were what I valued about our marriage? I think this conversation is over, I said finally. We're both too emotional for productive discussion. Fine, James bit out. But this isn't finished, Emma. Your father may think he holds all the cards because of the building, but Pinnacle has options. Remember that. The implied threat hung in the air even after we disconnected. I sat in the gathering darkness of my childhood bedroom, trying to process the conversation and what it revealed. The James I'd spoken to bore little resemblance to the man I'd believed I married, the ambitious but fair-minded professional I'd supported for 7 years. This James was bitter, vindictive, willing to threaten my family to maintain control. Had he always been this person beneath the polished exterior? Or had recent events, the lost promotion, my departure, the public correction from Victoria, pushed him toward behavior he wouldn't normally exhibit? And did the distinction even matter at this point? The next morning brought unexpected clarity in the form of an email from Victoria Barnes, addressed to both me and my father. Miguel and Emma, I wanted to follow up on yesterday's meeting and clarify Pinnacle's position regarding the Community Development Initiative. The board remains fully committed to this partnership, which we believe represents not just good corporate citizenship, but sound long-term business strategy. Regarding yesterday's interruption, please be assured that James Mitchell was not speaking for Pinnacle Investments. His views do not reflect our corporate values or direction. Steps have been taken to address this disconnect. Emma, I sincerely hope you'll accept the foundation position regardless of personal complications. Your expertise would be invaluable to this initiative. I'm available to discuss any concerns either of you might have. Victoria Barnes, CEO, Pinnacle Investments. I read the email twice, wondering what steps have been taken meant exactly. When my phone rang moments later with May's number, I had a feeling I was about to find out. "Emma, are you sitting down?" May asked without greeting. "Yes. Why?" "James has been placed on administrative leave, effective immediately." I sank onto my bed, genuinely shocked. "What? Why?" "Officially for actions contrary to company policy and direction," May replied. "Unofficially? He threatened to leverage client relationships against the firm if Victoria didn't reconsider the community initiative approach." "He what?" "Tyler was in the room," May continued. "He said James completely lost it after yesterday's meeting, went to Victoria's office and basically said either she backs his approach or he'll take key clients with him to a competitor." I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. James's cold fury, his absolute certainty that his value to the firm would force Victoria's hand. It was the ultimate miscalculation. "What happens now?" I asked. "No one knows for sure," May admitted. "But Tyler thinks the leave is just a prelude to termination." "Victoria's furious, not just about the threat, but about how James spoke to your father in the meeting. Apparently, she's been watching him more closely since the partners' dinner. This is—" I trailed off, unable to find adequate words. "A complete disaster," May finished for me. "I'm sorry, Emma, I know things were already complicated between you two." After we hung up, I sat motionless, absorbing the implications. James's career at Pinnacle was likely over. The very thing he'd built his entire identity around, sacrificed for, prioritized above all else, and he'd destroyed it himself, with his arrogance and inability to adapt. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complex mix of sadness, concern, and, if I was honest, relief. Whatever happened next between us, the power dynamic had fundamentally shifted. James could no longer position himself as the successful provider gracing his kindergarten teacher wife with a lifestyle she couldn't possibly achieve on her own. My father found me still sitting on my bed, staring at Victoria's email. "Bad news?" he asked, noting my expression. "James has been placed on administrative leave," I told him. "He apparently threatened Victoria after your meeting yesterday." My father's eyebrows rose. "That was unwise, to put it mildly." I looked up at him. "Dad, did you know this would happen? When you bought the building? When you offered me the foundation job? Was this the plan?" He sat beside me, his expression serious. "Emma, I've known men like James my entire life. Men who believe their education, their connections, their particular kind of intelligence makes them superior. To people like me, I didn't need to plan anything. Men like that eventually self-destruct when their assumptions are challenged. So the building purchase, the foundation offer, that wasn't about James at all? The building was a sound investment, regardless of who rented space there," my father explained. "The foundation is something your mother and I have wanted to establish for years, and you're genuinely the most qualified person we know to run it." He smiled slightly. "Not everything revolves around James Mitchell, even if he believes it." "Does." I laughed despite myself, recognizing the truth in his words. James did indeed view the world as organized around him and his concerns. The idea that my father had made major business decisions without considering their impact on James Mitchell would be inconceivable to him. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling suddenly adrift. "What do you want to do?" my father countered. "Not what you think you should do, or what would make others happy. What would make you happy, Emma?" It was a shockingly simple question that I hadn't truly asked myself in years. What did I want? Strip away the expectations, the compromises, the careful navigation of James's priorities, and what remained? "I want to accept the foundation position," I said immediately. "I want to do meaningful work that I'm good at." My father nodded, encouragingly. "What else?" I hesitated, the words difficult after years of suppression. I want to be valued for who I am, not who someone else wants me to be. And James? My father asked gently. Do you want to try to save your marriage? That was the hardest question of all. Did I? After everything that had happened, after seeing so clearly the fundamental misalignment in our values, our priorities, our very worldviews. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me thinks I should try. 7 years is a long time to just walk away from. But another part wonders if it was ever really what I thought it was. Only you can answer that, my father said, patting my hand. But remember, Mija, time invested isn't a reason to invest more if the return diminishes your spirit. Coming from my practical, business-minded father, the advice struck home with particular force. He was right. The years I'd already given to the marriage weren't a compelling reason to give more if the fundamental issues couldn't be resolved. Later that day, I texted James, "We need to talk, in person, tomorrow." His reply was immediate. My office, 10 a.m. I almost laughed at the presumption. Even now, he was trying to dictate the terms, to position the meeting on his territory. No, I replied. Neutral ground, the coffee shop on Madison, 11 a.m. A longer pause, then, fine. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Winter sunlight harsh against fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I dressed carefully, not in one of the polished professional outfits James preferred, but in clothes that made me feel comfortable and confident. Dark jeans, a soft sweater, boots that were stylish but practical for the weather. Small rebellions that nonetheless felt significant. I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early, selecting a table in the corner that offered some privacy without complete isolation. James arrived precisely at 11, his punctuality one constant in a sea of change. He looked different. His usual immaculate appearance slightly diminished, shadows under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights, a tension in his movements that hadn't been there before. "Emma," he said, sliding into the seat opposite mine without removing his coat, as if uncertain he'd be staying long. "James," I replied, pushing a cup toward him. "I ordered your usual." He looked momentarily surprised by the consideration, then nodded his thanks. "You've heard?" "About the administrative leave?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. Victoria overreacted. She'll realize her mistake when clients start asking questions. Even now, he couldn't see it, couldn't recognize that his approach had fundamentally failed, that the world was changing around him while he remained rigidly committed to an outdated paradigm. "I don't think she will," I said gently. "The board supports her vision for Pinnacle. The community initiative has been well received. Your approach is the past, James, not the future." He stared at me, genuine confusion in his eyes. "Since when do you understand corporate strategy?" "You teach kindergarten." "Taught," he corrected himself. "I've always understood more than you gave me credit for," I replied, refusing to be baited by the dismissal. "But that's not why I wanted to meet." "Why then? To gloat?" Bitterness seeped into his tone. "To tell me how your family has won?" "This isn't about winning or losing, James. It's about recognizing reality." I took a deep breath. "I'm accepting the foundation position." "Of course you are," he muttered, "and I'm filing for divorce." That caught him off guard. He set down his untouched coffee, genuine shock registering on his face. "What?" "I think we both know this isn't working," I said quietly. "Hasn't been working for a long time. Because of one fight? One professional setback? That's it? 7 years just discarded?" "No. Because of fundamental differences in how we see the world, how we treat people, what we value." I met his gaze directly. "I can't be with someone who looks down on my family, who sees relationships as transactions, who measures people's worth by their utility to him. James leaned forward, something like panic flashing in his eyes. People change. Emma, I can change. Can you? I asked simply. Because from where I'm sitting, even after everything that's happened, you still don't see the real problem. You still think Victoria overreacted. You still think my father orchestrated some elaborate plot against you. You still think I couldn't possibly understand corporate strategy. He had no immediate reply to that, perhaps recognizing the truth in my assessment. I don't hate you, James, I continued more gently. I think you're brilliant in many ways, driven, focused, determined. But those qualities have hardened into something rigid and unyielding. You can't adapt, can't consider that other perspectives might have value. And your father's perspective is inherently superior because he built his business from nothing? James challenged, a flash of the old arrogance returning. No, it's valuable because it's different from yours, because it considers more than just profit margins and shareholder value, because it recognizes that businesses exist within communities, not above them. James stared into his coffee cup for a long moment. When he looked up, something had shifted in his expression, the calculation replaced by something that might have been genuine regret. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. I thought I was building something for us. I know, I replied, and I did. James wasn't a villain in his own mind. He was the hero of his story, making necessary sacrifices for a greater goal. The tragedy was his inability to see that others might not share his vision or values. What happens now? He asked, suddenly looking lost. We move forward separately, I said gently. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. We can keep it civil, straightforward. He nodded slowly, the fight gone out of him. And Pinnacle? The foundation? Those aren't your concern anymore, I reminded him. You'll find your path, James. You always do. As we said our goodbyes outside the coffee shop, snow beginning to fall again in gentle flakes, I felt not triumph, but a quiet certainty that I was finally choosing my own path. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Divorce never is. New careers bring challenges, family dynamics evolve. But for the first time in years, I was walking forward as Emma, not as an extension of James Mitchell's ambitions. 3 months later, seated in my new office at the Reyes Community Foundation, looking out over downtown Westlake with a clear view of Oakwood Tower, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to win an argument or prove someone wrong. Sometimes it's simply to walk away with your dignity intact toward a future you've chosen for yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't. Want to pass these up? Just click and check them out.